Hi, how you doing? And welcome back to another video from Average FPL. Bit of a different video today. Some of you guys have been sending in your first draft team, so we're going to be having a little look at three of those today. My thoughts on how I think they're going to do, and any potential changes that I think you could make for the better. So before we get into it, please like and subscribe. Any support on the channel is greatly appreciated, and hopefully we can have a really good start to the season in terms of content and FPL. So this is team one in front of me, and to be honest, there's a few changes I might make looking at this. It's quite a sort of a well-rounded team in terms of who you've got in different positions. But really, you'd swap your bench around, if I'm being honest. I think if you've got Benteke and Mitrovic up front, I'd swap them out for Cancelo and Coutinho. I know you can't. I know you need one striker in at least, but I would think, that is a very sort of bottom-heavy team, if that makes sense, in terms of quite light on attackers there. I know Benteke picked it up a little bit last season, but I don't think I'd have him in my team, especially at the start of this one. Mitrovic should be a really interesting one. Now, I think that's a great option. Fulham's fixtures aren't looking too good early on, although they do have a couple of good fixtures initially. They're playing teams like Liverpool, and that's going to limit the amount of chances Mitrovic is surely going to get. But I think the whole league is kind of waiting to see if he can continue that record-breaking form from the Championship into the Premiership, or whether it is he's one of those players that dominates the Championship but just can't make that step up to the Premiership. I think also having Rashford, I'd be tempted to look at swapping him out. I don't see, he has a bit to prove really in terms of the football based on last season, and he's not cheap, and really what you're looking for are those players that are going to contribute straight away into your starting team. So the defense looks good. I quite like Diego Carlos. I think he'll be interesting to see how that pans out. I think Allison and Trent speak for themselves. Whether you'd want to go in with a 5.5 million goalkeeper is up to you, and a lot of teams will look at that and they'll decide on the price of the goalkeeper based on how the rest of the team fits in. For a lot of people, goalkeeper will probably be the last place you should decide, and it's ironic because a lot of the times when you're building your team, you start at the goalkeeper, but there's that many good goalkeepers, and the point spread is so thin with them that I would probably make them your last pick of your team, because the point variance of different positions is a lot wider from top to bottom than it is within the goalkeepers. Reece James will be good to see if he can come back from injury, and Perisic is well interesting as well. You've got Kulusevski in there, a couple of Spurs players. You have got in your defence two newly transferred players in Perisic and Diego Carlos, and you do need to be wary about how they will settle in at the start of the season. Maybe after about 10 games, they'll be great. I understand you might not want to miss out on points from someone like Perisic, but he's not also guaranteed a starting spot. He is up against Sessegnon on that left side under Conte. So yeah, you've got Salah and Saka, solid picks. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Coutinho and Cancelo need to come off the bench and rotate out, probably for Benteke and Rashford. I'd definitely get that captain's armband off Benteke. I know you might be a big Crystal Palace fan or something, but just Captain Benteke as well, I think is asking for a bit too much. So the second team we've got here, now looking at that, you've where the previous team probably had too little attacking firepower. This team's gone all in. So you've got Kane, Haaland, and Calvert-Lewin. All those defenders in there look like 4.5 million defenders to me. Now, we did speak previously about how that might be a good thing going forward to have cheap defenders. There's so many good options. 4.5 million in the teams. I don't really see a problem with doing that. I think it's, you know, it might be fear of missing out. I think to have a Cancelo or a Trent or a Robertson, at least one in there, just as a bit of an insurance policy if things don't go to plan, might be a good idea. But if this is your budget and this is what you've got, then I think that's fine. Sessegnon, ironically, we've talked about Perisic in the last video, sorry, in the last team. competing with each other for positions, so I wouldn't be too sure about Sessignon, especially because your bench is looking really thin. You've got Botman newly transferred in, so if Sessignon's not playing, I guess that's somebody in there who could come in. But the same with Johnson. Now I know David Moyes really likes Johnson at right back. He's been injured last season, and when he's fit, he has played. So that could be a like an underrated defender. But going into the season, especially if you've got no bench, you need your starters to know that they're going to be playing. If you can't guarantee that, then you need to have a little reshuffle. Um, I do think that benches are overrated at the start of the season. I think there is absolutely no point having a full playing bench unless you plan on using your bench boost to get ahead in your mini leagues. I think that last sub spot on your bench might as well be the cheapest player in the whole of FPL to save you money elsewhere. And I think on a bad week, you might make it all the way down to your second bench spot. But a lot of times, you're only really using the 12th guy on the bench. So I don't see too much of a problem there. I would just be a little bit cautious about a couple of those defenders maybe not playing. I think your midfield looks good. Kovacic is an interesting one. Now he does play a lot, and he has been known to get forward as well, especially if Kante is in that sitting role. I know he's about 5 million, so maybe that was sort of a last pick of your team. Just find the best 5 million option. I don't really think there's that many other good options at that price point. So whether you downgrade a 4.5 million defender to a 4 million defender and look up that 5.5 million midfielder instead of Kovacic, it's fair enough. I think that's an option. Be interesting to see what Billy Gilmore does this season. Whether he goes on loan somewhere, has a bit more of a productive season than he did on Norwich last year. And I think Son and De Bruyne are fantastic options. De Bruyne, he's going to play. Having Haaland on your team as well. If Man City score, one of those two is probably going to be involved. And same with Kane and Son. Calvert-Lewin, hopefully he will do better. Had a bit of off the field problems last year, so hopefully that's all sorted out. I think when he plays and he's into it, I think he's one of the best strikers in the league. So going forward, that's great. I think you're taking a little bit too many risks in defence, but maybe that's the strategy and maybe it'll pay off. The last team we're going to look at today is probably, looking at this, is probably the most well-rounded team we've got so far. Now, big at the back, reasonably so. Cancelo, Robertson, and Trent can't get much bigger. Lloris in goal, I think he's a very solid keeper, and I think Spurs are going to be tight under Conte. So I think having any Spurs sort of defensive player, if they're going to play, is a great shout. Anderson from Crystal Palace got 120 odd points last season, and he's really cheap, really good value. I think he's very underrated. Crystal Palace didn't score many last season, but didn't concede many either. So I think that is a great shout. And Trippier, before he got injured, if he is fully fit, he really was kind of the catalyst that sparked Newcastle's season. After joining in January, I know he only played a few games, but he was really sort of the spark plug, and he scored a couple of goals which started the momentum. I think if he hadn't got injured, a lot more people would be talking about him right now as an option. I think he's only 5 million. I think he's a great shout. That defence looks absolutely fantastic. Whether you want to double up on Liverpool defenders, it's up to you. There is sort of the scope for dropping Robertson or Trent, the cheaper defender that's maybe in a solid mid-table team, and then upgrading, someone on your bench, maybe even upgrading your first substitute in Ward-Prowse up to someone who maybe score a bit more consistently. Now, looking at the midfield, Diaz, Saka, Mount, and Foden, they're pretty much all 8 million players. In fact, I think they are all 8 million players. All that mid-range sort of price for midfielder. You've got no big hitters in midfield. So if they're all playing, and it is likely that they will play, I think Sterling going to Chelsea will really free up a bit more game time for Foden. I think if Man City don't replace Sterling, which I'm not sure they will, I think for people like Foden, Mahrez, there'll be a great shout for a few more consistent minutes, and we'll probably see a bit less rotation in that Man City lineup. Mount and Saka, they're pretty much guaranteed to play, and when they do, they contribute. And with Mane gone, I think Luis Diaz, he looked so good at the end of last season. I think that's a great shout as well. Haaland up front, I mean, we spoke about in a previous video. Really, there wasn't many great attacking options last year. I think aside from Haaland and Kane, maybe Gabriel Jesus, who I had in my initial team, I'm not really losing any sleep of not having any strikers in. I think they can all go on good runs. You know, you've got someone like Callum Wilson, who's got potential to score goals in bunches. But in terms of having a consistent striker that you'd want to keep in across the season, I'm not really sure other than Haaland and Kane, and I said Jesus, but even Jesus might there's no it's not a sure thing after transferring teams. But I think that's fair enough to go with one striker and sort of, put the power into the rest of the team. If there was one weakness here, I'd say you'd maybe want a Son or a Salah in your midfield. But other than that, it looks really good. So yeah, if if you've got a team you want to send me, feel free. If let me know what you think about my analysis of these teams. I think they all look reasonable in their own right. But if you do anything different, please just pop it in the comments. Like I said before, any likes and subscribes is greatly appreciated. Thank you very much for listening, and we will see you in the next one.